All right, so this video was going to be a review of Rick Beato and his video of great songs by artists people hate, but I wasn't too impressed with the video, at least by the title. The title is kind of everything I hate about YouTube titles because he says songs and artists, meaning that this was maybe like some sort of top 5, top 10, something. But what he ends up doing is just talking about Amsterdam by Coldplay. So it's one song and one artist, which that I thought was a little misleading. And then really the only difference between this video and his like what makes this song great videos is he mentions that a lot of people don't like Coldplay. Other than that, it's basically part of his series, What Makes This Song Great. And from what I've seen of those, they don't really ever explain what makes the song great. It's more like a listening party kind of format, which makes great content, don't get me wrong. But again, it's like the title is a little bit misleading because you think you're going to come in and learn what makes this song great through maybe an analysis. At least that's what I'm thinking. And then you find out that it's just him pointing out some stuff while you listen to it and get excited about music. So it's really more on like a music appreciation kind of side of things rather than a music theory side of things, which again is fine. But at the end of his videos, he usually shills for his music theory course. And I don't have a problem with people trying to promote themselves, but my problem is that somebody might watch this video and think that he's giving an analysis, think that that's what music theory is, when in fact his videos are more like a music appreciation kind of format. So with that, I decided that I should just do my own analysis of this Coldplay piece so we can have some, substantial reasons why this song is so cool. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right on in. I'm Dr. Zach. Grab a cup of tea and join me. All right, to have an analysis, we need to first have some sort of argument of what we're trying to prove. For example, what I think is important in this song is the opening progression, the use of register, and the melodic contour. Okay, and within that melodic contour, there is a half-step motive and a motive using a third and a motive that uses the major second or major ninth, depending on how you want to look at it, above the root of the chord. For example, our first chord when the melody comes in is E flat major, and the first note of the melody is F. So, right, a whole step above our root of the chord, or you can think of it as the ninth. There are some other things that are interesting about the piece that I'll mention at the end, but these are kind of the main elements that we're going to be looking at today. So this opening progression, I have a loose transcription of it. So I'm going to show you some of the important features. I'm going to show you the general rhythm. The rhythm isn't 100% accurate, but that's because this is just for analysis purposes, right? This isn't for performance. So that's why I haven't included all the information. This opening progression is the genesis for all of the melodic material in this piece. Okay, there's an argument, and here's how I'm going to prove it. First, we get this figure in the bass. Technically, there is a B flat below that. And then here, we switch off, and we get a figure in the treble clef. Okay, so let's talk about that figure. We have a half step there, B flat to A natural, and then we have a third, and then another third. Okay, so we have the major third, and then the minor third after that to get us back to this A flat chord. So listen to how that sounds with some bass underneath it. End up back on our E flat. Okay, so with that half step and those two thirds, you can see that reflected in the opening bass figure. If we just look at the dotted quarter notes, it moves by half step before then it goes on to support the other figure as bass. And the little 16th notes we get in there, there's a third, and then it repeats that third again. And then we get that half step with the other thirds. So that's what I mean when I said this is kind of the genesis of all of the motives in this piece, because we'll see those thirds and those half steps frequently. As far as what the chord progression is doing, we start on E flat, and then we go down a fourth to B flat. Now I'm gonna always use the smaller number, so we could say we went up a fifth to B flat, but that would be kind of the same thing with a larger number. So I'm saying we're going down a fourth, go E flat to B flat, then we go down another fourth to F. Okay, so we've had all fourths until this final chord where we get a third. Okay, so the chord that's the most important in this progression, in my opinion, is that last one, because it breaks the pattern, and it's a third, which we've seen be an important idea already. So we have this F, then A flat, and then what do we have to get back to start the progression? Another fourth. So even between repetitions of the progression, we have all fourths until we get that F to A flat. Okay, and I really feel like a lift there, and I think that lift, that kind of brightness that comes from it, is because it's breaking the pattern. If we just kept following the pattern, it might be like this. Right, just keep on going around the circle of fourths. But instead of that, we get this kind of lift to A flat. So even though we're lowering the A natural down to A flat, that motion of the chords has this really kind of cool lift to it. Also, if we were in kind of traditional theory, we would expect that F to go back to B flat, since F is the 5 chord or the dominant of B flat. So then that would sound something like this. Right? Not nearly as interesting or colorful that way, but that would be one way to kind of approach it. It also would be strange to see B flat going to F and then back to B flat. That's a little odd, especially in a short context like this, because it's putting a lot of emphasis on that B flat. But luckily we don't have that here, right? We just have that F to A flat. And then, like we see in the second time this chord progression happens, we then get a little walk down here. So I went ahead and made up some labels for these. I called this first chord progression the melodic version, because we have this, which is really important, shows up a lot, has all the intervals we need kind of for the entire piece. So we have the melodic version of it. The next time it comes back, we have the walk down version of it, because we are walking back down to our home key of E flat. The third time we get it, it's the melodic version again. And then the last time here, we have something kind of completely different. This last one is just like called it like a tag, or you could call it like a closing kind of gesture, right? It's the first time we get something besides this. So it signals that we're coming to the close of something. This is a great strategy when you're writing music, is to have that little bit of variety. They could have done away with the walk down, but then it would just be the same thing 3 times in a row until you got to the last time, which then was something different. But by adding that walk down, we get a little bit of variety, go back to something that we've already heard, and then we get something completely different to signal that something is about to change. And the thing that's going to change is the singer is going to join us here. Final comment about this opening. We spent a lot of time on it because, like I said, I think this is very important. But all of these chords are major chords. But this piece has such a emotional, kind of almost sentimental quality to it, and I think that comes from this, that kind of lean from B flat to A, right? We get that dissonance on that chord, then there we have that another half step, which creates the dissonance between A flat and G. This shows up later, so we'll put a pin in that A flat to G major seventh kind of quality. So real quick, how we get into the verse is great because we have this. Do you remember at the very beginning how I said the major ninth is a focus of this piece? Well, here we get that first ninth sound. And how does it start? But with another ninth, but this time on E flat. Resolving to here. There's that ninth again. And then here, there's that major seventh dissonance. But you can think of that major seventh as being a half step away. And remember how I said in the beginning, the half step is an important motive, right? So there we get that kind of half step feeling again. And then we come back to our melody. So the first time here, it's actually a C natural. But we end with that major ninth quality again. Okay, which is really nice because it kind of frames the verse. We start the verse with the major ninth on E flat, and we end the verse with the major ninth on A flat. So a great way to structure it because we get those same kind of harmonies, but with different chords at different points of the piece. As far as which versions of the progression, it's all pretty straightforward. We have the melodic, we have the walk down. The walk down's a little bit altered because of how soon the artist changes on the note versus how it's first presented. And then we get the melodic version again, and then the tag. And the tag is the first time that the vocalist actually follows what the piano's doing. So here I have a note that on the second time, because this verse comes back kind of right away, he starts an octave higher than this F. So instead of, he starts up here, okay? And I've been playing these an octave higher than he sings just to make it a little bit easier for us to hear. Technically, he actually starts here, and then now he's singing up in this range. Okay, so the second time now he's jumping up the octave, but when we get to these figures in the piano, he's matching it. So we get the octave up, so now we're following the piano line after those initial F notes. So here's where register starts to become important. Okay, we started the verse with just the low register. Now we have, okay, I played those in the octave that he sings it. So we started with the low register. Now we have the higher register of his voice to provide a little bit of variety. Another common thing people do is they kind of sing the verse the same way both times. But what he did is he sang the first verse with these other pitches that are printed on the page. And then for the second time, he uses that piano line to fill in the other notes. That's a really nice tool because we heard that piano line all in the introduction. So if he started with the piano line in his voice right away, it would just sound like it all matched. It might not be as interesting to listen to because it's just something we've heard over and over again. But by singing the first verse with some different pitches, it provides that variety that keeps us interested in listening. So now he's following the piano. He's doing this jump from the high register to the low register. And we'll just keep a note of that because that will be important later on. And finally here, when he ends the first verse we get this, start from the E flat. Right, that major ninth quality, and now we launch into the chorus. So the chorus, I'm just going to show the simplified melodic line, what he's singing, because the instrumental stuff I didn't think was as important to my analysis. And is not something that I wanted to focus on, just so we can have a little bit more conciseness to this analysis. So how does he start? With that major ninth quality, right? And then the melody goes. So remember how I said that major seventh dissonance, or if you think about that just half step comes back? Well, here it is. The first two bars of the chorus, we have the major ninth and we have that kind of half step or major seventh dissonance. The other interesting part about the chorus is that we have this third idea, right? That gets us into our dissonances. And if you remember back from our little Genesis moment here, there's our third, another third. The bass had the thirds as well. So here we're continuing that idea of using thirds in this piece. Okay, so we just got onto that A flat. Okay, kind of crunchy there, right? So in this part, Beato says that the D flat here is just a blues kind of note. And I think that is not giving it enough weight that it deserves. So for a blues note, usually what we do is we lower the third of the scale. So in this case, if we're in E flat, we would lower it to G flat, right? To get that kind of sound. But we can also think about blues notes as like lowering the third of any chord if that's where we're sitting. So in Beato's defense, like he was saying that instead of doing this, it's right, which is true, that's happening. But I think that this little half step here, right, is relating back to our melodic figure. That's where it actually comes from. It's not just a random blues note that the singer decided to throw in because he was feeling like it. It actually has some significance in this piece. There's a precedent for this half step here. So that's my argument for that. And then going on, we just get the same kind of thing over our chord progression. And you probably noticed I'm playing in the singer's octave now. I just feel like this range is a little bit easier to hear. Before we move on, what I wanted to point out is that this chorus is actually the same chord progression from the verse, just in what we call a different rotation. Okay, so the kind of original form of our progression was E flat, B flat, F, A flat. And now what we're doing is we're starting on that F, so we've kind of rotated to the F, and we're moving through the progression now, starting on F. F, A flat, E flat, B flat. So we don't get any other chords besides these four in here. We just have rotated it for the chorus. Cool little trick, because the chorus does sound kind of fresh and interesting. And I think what gives it that fresh quality is that we're picking the most interesting part of the progression, the kind of lift to A flat. So really neat trick that they used here. And then as far as register goes, this is all high in the register, right? If we were to play it as written, right? Not in the singer's register. We're up high in the voice versus being low in the voice like we were earlier. So to recap the register, we started low, and then we did some of these octave jumps, right, between the high and the low. And now here we're all on the high register. Okay, so now let's look at what the bridge does. The bridge, or just kind of like closing section. I'm not as familiar with pop music terms, so I just kind of viewed this as a bridge. If somebody else knows the correct term for this, please leave a comment below, because I'd love to learn that. In our bridge, we have a combination of the verse and the chorus, but it's not combining the pitches, which you can typically see, especially in some classical works. You have one idea, you have the second idea, then you kind of like use both of those melodic ideas together. But here what we do is we have the third idea, right, from the chorus, and we have the octave jump idea from the verse. And then that D flat from the chorus. So this pitch-wise represents the chorus more than the verse, but by using the different registers, it's kind of calling back to the verse. When I was listening to this, I was like, this feels like the chorus, but with verse energy. And I think this is why, is because we have that register jump from high notes to low notes. He does something a little bit similar in the third verse. He starts low, and then the rest of the time, he jumps up. So he kind of like starts to blend it there. And then when we get to the bridge, we get this full kind of blending of the registers with the chorus idea. So as far as our important motives, like the half step or the major ninth kind of sound, we still have that kind of spicy note, the D flat. For our half step, we now are landing on chord tones with the F. So we have our, I'll play it up an octave so we can hear a little better. There's our half step, major seventh kind of motive. And then here is a really cool moment. This is like the most emotionally tense part of the piece. So we've had this huge opening up in the instrumentation, which I'll mention at the end, in the bridge, but now we get to really feel it in the vocal part as well. We go back to the chorus type of register. We're no longer changing kind of the octave, as it were, going from a high register to a low register, because it's not truly an octave. But we, instead of going up to the G, which we expect, so in the chorus, right? We get all the way up to that G. Now we're being denied that, and instead we get the F. Right? So that is such a cool idea because it creates this incredibly tense moment, this kind of like high point, without using a high note. The highest note we have in here is that G from the chorus, but by introducing this figure again and expecting the arrival on G, we are thwarted in our expectations by getting that F instead. So such a cool moment, such a great way to use a melody to create that sort of tension. Said I was going to mention the instrumentation. It's really well layered in. We start just with voice and piano, and then by the time the chorus comes around, we get some voices added to get some harmony in there. And the voices are, I believe, just kind of on the words with the singer. Then instead of hearing the words in verse 3, we get oohs. So different use of harmony, right? Instead of harmonizing with multiple people singing the words, we're now harmonizing with some like oohs in the background. In chorus 2, I heard something like a bass guitar. Is either bass guitar or like a synth bass. I think synth bass is what's happening there. But we get some harmony on the words, we get some oohs, we get some this, that, and the other, but then it kind of like fades out before this big instrumental that takes us to our bridge. And the instrumental is so impactful. We get, the piano there, but you hear this organ faintly in the background, and it starts to get louder and louder and louder and louder, and then it ushers in the bridge, and right on the bridge, then we get drums, we get bass, we get guitar. It's just this explosion of color and sound, and it's super cool. At the very end, we get the guitar kind of like echoing, everything else fades out, we just get bass, we get a little bit of the piano and the organ, and it just like kind of melts away and is reminiscent of that first kind of sound we heard at the beginning. So a really nice way of using all the different instruments for impact rather than just using all the instruments kind of continuously throughout. Finally, there was one lyric I wanted to point out. I didn't want to go too deep into the lyrics and the music in this piece, but I just thought this was so clever, I had to point it out. So in the first verse, we get the lyric fading and waiting. So we have this, my star is fading. Okay, so that fading, the music kind of fades with it. Fading. And then we get the rhyme with waited, and it goes, if I only waited. So we're waiting on the word waited. So this is a really cool way how it's the same music, but the artist used it for this fading effect and for that waiting effect. It's almost like a musical rhyme with itself. It fits both of those words really nicely, even though the words mean different things. So I just thought that was super clever, super cool point that I just wanted to close with. So just to sum up everything, the chord progression in the beginning gives us all the material that we use for the rest of the song. We have a rotation of the chord progression for the chorus and the bridge. We use all those little motives like the half step and the thirds, right, for the melody. And then we also get that in the harmony. For the half step, we see that with the major 7th harmony. And then as far as like the major 9th harmony, I would say you can argue that that first figure in the bass, that stepped from E flat up to F, right? That was that first instance of the major 9th harmony, even though we got that F just for kind of like a fraction. And even then, at the end of the chord progression, it does end on that B flat, which is the major 9th above the A flat. So this is why I think this piece is great. This is why I think this piece really works, is because it has all these little interconnections. It uses register, right, to kind of differentiate the verse from the chorus, but it blends the register and kind of the chorus ideas for the bridge. And when we get that final push at the end, we get that energy of the chorus, but with that one note difference, right? That just makes us feel like we're longing for that higher note, that G. So it's really impactful, really effective, and I think overall just a well-designed piece. So if you enjoyed this, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.